Be me. Centre Sue. Marketing Director. Married for 8 years to husband Jake, who is 36 and mid-level manager at tech company, had strong feminist beliefs about equal partnership in marriage, didn't want traditional dynamic where woman supports man's career, believed both partners should be equally ambitious and successful, not wife sacrificing for husband's advancement. Jake had been at same company for 10 years. Competent manager but never particularly driven about climbing corporate ladder. Was content with his role managing team of 12. Good work-life balance. Came home at reasonable hours every evening. Meanwhile, I'd been aggressively advancing my career, went from coordinator to director in 6 years through dedication, worked long hours, extensively, always thinking about next promotion and career advancement opportunities. Started feeling resentful that Jake seemed comfortable staying at same level while I kept pushing myself forward. Felt like I was carrying the ambition for both of us. He was coasting while I was constantly striving. Had several conversations with Jake about his lack of career drive and ambition over the years. He'd say he was happy with his current role, enjoyed his team, didn't want stress of senior leadership. This frustrated me deeply. Felt like he wasn't living up to his potential or contributing equally to our partnership. Posted on feminist forums about feeling resentful toward unambitious husband who seemed content with mediocrity. Got responses from other women who related to feeling like they were more driven than male partners. One woman suggested withholding intimacy until husband showed more career ambition and drive for advancement. She said, "If he's not meeting you as equal in professional achievement, he's not deserving of full partnership benefits." This resonated with me. Felt like Jake was getting all benefits of marriage while not pushing himself professionally. Had serious conversation with Jake about my frustrations with his career stagnation and lack of ambition. Told him I needed him to be more of an equal partner by pursuing advancement and showing professional drive. He said he contributed financially. We were comfortable. Didn't understand why his contentment was problem. I said it wasn't about money. It was about partnership. I needed someone equally ambitious, not someone coasting. He looked hurt and asked what specifically I wanted him to do differently about his career. I said I wanted him to pursue promotion to senior manager or director level, show he was as driven as me. He said those roles required 60 to 70-hour weeks and constant politics he had no interest in engaging with. I said then he needed to find something he was interested in pursuing. I couldn't be only ambitious. One got more frustrated over following months as Jake continued in same role without pursuing advancement. Posted in feminist group about situation, and one woman suggested making physical intimacy contingent on career progress. She said, men respond to incentives. If comfortable life doesn't motivate him, maybe losing intimacy will. This felt extreme, but I was desperate to motivate Jake to be better partner by advancing professionally. Had another conversation with Jake, telling him our intimacy life would be on hold until he pursued promotion. He looked absolutely shocked and asked if I was seriously withholding sex to force him to pursue job he didn't want. I said I was setting boundary about what I needed. An equal partner. Someone who matched my professional ambition. He said this felt manipulative and punishing him for being content with his current role and work-life balance. I said if he saw it as punishment, maybe that revealed he knew he wasn't being equal partner in marriage. He was quiet for a long time. Then said he needed to think about what this meant for our relationship. Following weeks were tense and distant. Jake slept in guest room, and we barely spoke beyond logistics. He started working longer hours and seemed to be networking more, based on evening meetings he mentioned. Part of me felt satisfied that boundary was motivating him to finally take career advancement seriously. After a month, Jake told me he'd applied for senior manager position at his company and was interviewing. Felt vindicated that setting clear boundary had motivated him to pursue advancement he'd been avoiding. Told him I was proud he was finally stepping up and meeting me as equal partner professionally. He didn't respond with enthusiasm I'd expected. Just said he'd let me know how interview process went. 2 weeks later, Jay came home and said he'd been offered senior manager position with significant raise. I was thrilled and told him this was exactly what our partnership needed. Him being as ambitious as me, he said quietly that he'd accepted the position and would be starting a new role following month. I moved toward him to celebrate and reconnect physically after month of distance I'd enforced. He stepped back and said we needed to have serious conversation about our marriage and relationship. Felt confused because I'd gotten exactly what I'd asked for. Jake pursuing and achieving promotion. He sat down and said, getting this promotion required a lot of reflection about what I actually wanted. I realized that I was happy with my previous role, and you were asking me to be unhappy to meet your standards. But I applied anyway because maybe you were right that I was coasting and should push myself. During interview process, I spent a lot of time thinking about whether this relationship made me happy, and I realized that it doesn't. That you've made your love and intimacy conditional on me meeting arbitrary standards. Felt panic rising in my chest. This wasn't the conversation I'd expected after he got promotion. I said I just wanted you to be equal partner. To be as driven and successful as me professionally. He said you wanted me to be like you. To value the same things you value. To measure success your way. I don't value climbing corporate ladder. I value time with you and reasonable work hours and enjoying my work. You've made it clear that those aren't the right values. That I'm an adequate partner if I'm content. This promotion you push me to pursue comes with 6 5-hour work weeks and constant political maneuvering. I'll be miserable in this role. But I did it because you made your acceptance of me conditional on career advancement, and in process of doing it, I realized I don't want to be in a relationship where acceptance is conditional. Started crying and said I didn't mean to make you feel inadequate. I just wanted you to reach your potential. He said, my potential in your eyes, not my own definition of what successful, satisfying life looks like. You've spent 2 years criticizing my contentment and month withholding intimacy to force me to change. That's not equal partnership. That's you trying to control me to match your vision of ideal husband. I said, I was trying to push you to be better, to not settle for mediocrity when you're capable of more. He said, you were trying to push me to be a different person. Someone who values career advancement over quality of life. I have never wanted senior leadership role. I've been clear about that. But my preferences didn't matter to you. What mattered was your image of what our partnership should look like. Your definition of equal. Ask desperately what this meant for our marriage. If getting promotion meant we could rebuild intimacy, he said, I filed for divorce. I'll be moving out this weekend. Promotion starts next month at new company. Felt like I'd been punched in stomach. This was completely opposite of outcome I'd been working toward. I said, you're leaving me after getting the promotion I pushed you to get. After finally meeting my standards, he said, you pushed me to get promotion to prove I was worthy of you. I got it to prove to myself I could. And in process realized I don't want to be with someone who makes love conditional on career performance. I've accepted senior leadership role at different company. I'll be miserable professionally, but at least divorced. Maybe eventually I'll find someone who accepts me as I am, instead of constantly pushing me to be different. Begged him to reconsider. Said, I've been wrong about making intimacy conditional on promotion. He said, yes, you were wrong about that. But you've been wrong about bigger things for years. You've been wrong about what makes someone a good partner. What equality in marriage actually means. You've treated my contentment as character flaw and my different values as inadequacy. I don't want to be with someone who sees me that way. Regardless of what job title I have, following weekend, Jake moved out to apartment he'd already secured closer to his new company. Sat empty house feeling devastated and confused about how pursuing equal partnership had ended marriage. Posted in Feminist forum about what happened. expecting support and sympathy for situation, got very mixed responses that challenged my entire approach to the situation over past years. Several women said I'd been controlling and manipulative, trying to force husband to pursue career he didn't want. One commented, "Equality doesn't mean both people have identical career ambitions and values." Another said, "Withholding intimacy to force behavior change is emotional abuse, not feminist empowerment." But others defended me, saying, "I deserve partner who matched my drive and ambition professionally." One said, "You shouldn't have to settle for unambitious man. You were right to push him toward advancement." Another said he was being lazy and you held him accountable. His leaving shows he couldn't handle equal partnership. This division in responses made me question whether I'd been right or completely wrong in my approach. Talked to my therapist about divorce and what had led to Jake leaving despite getting promotion. She asked me to describe what equal partnership meant to me and why Jake's career level had mattered so much. I explained that I needed a partner who was as ambitious and successful as me, who matched my professional drive. She asked why matching my specific career values was a requirement for partnership equality. I said because otherwise I was achieving more and working harder, carrying the ambition for both of us. She said, "Did Jake's contentment with his role mean he wasn't contributing equally to relationship in other ways?" I was quiet because Jake had always done more than half of housework, was emotionally supportive, great with my family. She said, "It sounds like you defined equality narrowly as matching your career ambition and drive, and dismissed ways Jake was contributing that didn't fit your specific definition of what equal partner looks like." This was painful realization that maybe I'd been measuring equality by wrong metrics entirely. Started thinking back over 8 years of marriage and how I treated Jake's career contentment. Had I been constantly critical and dismissive of his choices because they didn't match mine? Had I made him feel like he was inadequate despite being loving, supportive partner in every other way? Had I prioritized my vision of successful partnership over his happiness and what he valued? Called Jake a few days later, hoping to talk through what therapist had helped me realize. He said he appreciated me calling, but he was firm in decision to divorce and move forward. I said I realized I was wrong to make career advancement condition of intimacy and acceptance. He said, "Yes, you were wrong about that specific thing. But problem was much deeper and longer than that. You've been telling me for years that my contentment was inadequacy, that my values were wrong. That month of withholding intimacy was just most explicit version of conditional acceptance you'd shown all along. I've spent years feeling like I was failing you by being content, like I was defective for not wanting what you wanted. That's not sustainable foundation for marriage. Regardless of whether you acknowledged specific tactics were wrong, asked if there was any way to rebuild after I'd realized how wrong my approach had been. He said, "I've accepted a job I don't want and will hate because you convinced me my preferences were inadequate. I'll be working 65 hours per week in a role I have no passion for. That's the legacy of our marriage. Maybe in a few years I'll quit and find something I actually enjoy. But right now I'm just exhausted. Don't want to also do emotional work of rebuilding marriage with someone who spent years making me feel insufficient." This conversation ended any hope of reconciliation. Jake was done, and I had to accept responsibility. Divorce was finalized 4 months later. Jake stayed in senior manager role. He hated out of pride. Mutual friends told me he looked exhausted and stressed all the time. No longer the relaxed person he'd been. Felt terrible guilt that my pushing had resulted in him being miserable in career he'd never wanted. 6 months after divorce, ran into Jake's former colleague at networking event, who asked how he was doing. I said we divorced and I didn't really know how he was doing in new role and new life. She said it's shame what happened. Jake was best manager I ever had. Everyone loved working for him. He was so good at maintaining team morale and reasonable work pace. Rare in this industry. When he left for senior role elsewhere, we got manager who burns everyone out. Turnover is terrible now. Made me realize Jake had been successful in ways I'd never valued. Just not successful by my narrow definition. His team had loved him. He'd been happy. He'd had work-life balance I claimed to value as feminist, but I'd pushed him to abandon all of that to match my idea of ambitious, successful partner, year after divorce. Jake quit senior manager role and took sabbatical to figure out what he actually wanted. Heard through mutual friends he was traveling and seemed lighter and happier than he'd been in years. Was teaching English abroad and dating someone who apparently appreciated him for who he was. Felt complex mix of sadness that he'd found happiness after leaving me and shame about my role in his unhappiness. Started doing deep work in therapy about why I'd been so controlling about Jake's career choices. Therapist helped me see I'd tied my worth to professional achievement and needed partner who validated that. Jake's contentment threatened my worldview that constant striving and advancement were necessary for worth. If he could be happy and worthy while staying at same level, what did that say about my constant striving? Easier to make him wrong and push him to change than to question whether my values were serving me. This realization was devastating, but also liberating. Started examining my own relationship with work and ambition. Was I happy constantly striving and never content? Or was I driven by insecurity and need to prove worth? Did I actually enjoy my director role? Or was I just addicted to advancement and achievement? Started setting better boundaries at work and trying to find contentment in present rather than always pushing for next level. 2 years after divorce, Jake returned from sabbatical and took mid-level manager role at different company. Heard he'd specifically chosen position with good work, life, balance, and team he was excited to develop. Was in serious relationship with woman he'd met while traveling, who was teacher and shared his values. They apparently both valued quality of life over career advancement, were planning life around experiences, not titles. Felt genuinely happy for him while also mourning what I destroyed by not accepting those values in him. Posted on Feminist forum about what I'd learned from divorce. How I'd been wrong to impose my values. Got very different response than previous posts. Many women related to learning this lesson hard way. One woman said, "I did similar thing to my ex-husband. Couldn't accept that he was happy in his career. Pushed him to pursue advancement. He didn't want relationship ended. He's happier now without my pressure." Another said, "Reading your story helped me realize I'm doing this to my current partner before it's too late. He's happy, his high school teacher. But I keep pushing him to pursue administration because that's advancement, but he loves teaching and doesn't want to leave classroom. I need to accept his values. Not impose mine." Some women criticized me for admitting I'd been wrong, said I was reinforcing idea that women should accept less, that I'd had right to expect husband who matched my ambition and he'd failed to meet reasonable standard. But more women appreciated honest reflection about how equal partnership doesn't mean identical values. Started speaking about experience at relationship workshops, about defining equality in partnership. Main message was that equality isn't both people having identical career ambitions and definitions of success. It's both people's values and preferences being respected and treated as equally valid, that trying to force partner to adopt your values and priorities isn't creating equality. It's seeking control. 3 years after divorce. Was dating. Again. Being much more mindful about accepting people as they were. Went on several dates with high-achieving men who seemed perfect match for my professional ambition. But realized after a few months that I was still measuring worth by career metrics and missing bigger picture. Started dating teacher named Marcus, who was content in his role and passionate about his students. Felt old instinct to push him toward administration or other advancement to match my director-level status. But caught myself, and instead asked him what he loved about teaching and what his goals were. He lit up talking about wanting to develop better curriculum and mentor new teachers, goals at same level, not advancement. In past, I would have seen this as lack of ambition. Now I saw it as person with clear values and contentment. We dated for a year, and relationship was healthier than my marriage had ever been. He supported my career ambition, while I supported his passion for teaching, neither trying to change the other. He didn't feel inadequate because I had higher status job. I didn't feel held back by his contentment. We both brought different strengths and values to partnership that complemented rather than competed. 4 years after divorce, Jake got engaged to the woman he'd met during sabbatical travels. Mutual friend showed me engagement announcement and said they seemed genuinely happy and well-matched. She was elementary school teacher who valued work-life balance and experiences over career climbing. They were planning modest wedding and honeymoon focused on adventure travel, not expensive luxury. Felt truly happy for Jake, while also grieving younger version of myself who couldn't accept this in him. If I'd been able to value his contentment and quality of life priorities, we might still be married. Instead, I'd pushed him to be miserable, pursuing advancement that matched my values, not his. Wrote long letter to Jake, apologizing for years of making him feel inadequate for being content. Acknowledged that his values had been valid all along, and my pushing had been about my insecurity, not his inadequacy. Said I was genuinely happy he'd found partner who appreciated him for who he was, not who she wanted him to be. He responded briefly, saying he appreciated apology and had found peace with how things ended. That therapy had helped him understand marriage had been unhealthy for him long before intimacy ultimatum, that he'd been sacrificing his own values, trying to meet my standards, and losing himself in process. That divorce had been difficult, but ultimately freed him to find partner who accepted rather than try to change him. Wish me well in my own journey of learning what actually mattered in life and partnership. This response was gracious, but made clear he'd moved on completely, which I had to accept. 5 years after divorce, Marcus proposed and I said yes. Having learned so much about what partnership actually meant, wasn't about both people having identical ambitions or career trajectories or definitions of success. Was about mutual respect for different values and both people feeling accepted for who they authentically were. Marcus would stay teacher his whole career, and I fully supported that because he was doing work he loved. I'd recently turned down promotion to VP because role would require sacrificing work-life balance. I'd learned to value. Old me would have taken it automatically. New me could choose based on what actually mattered to me. Started doing workshops about learning from failed first marriage and what equal partnership really meant. Shared story of pushing Jake toward promotion he didn't want and losing marriage in process. Main lesson was that equality doesn't require identical paths. It requires equal respect for different paths. That trying to force partner to match your values and ambitions isn't creating equality, it's destroying partnership. That accepting someone else's definition of success and contentment is harder but more important than imposing yours. Workshop participants consistently said this, challenged their assumptions about what they should expect from partners. One woman said, "I've been upset. My boyfriend won't pursue management, but he loves being individual contributor. Your story helped me see I was measuring his worth by my values, not respecting his own choices." Another said, "I almost left my wife because she wasn't ambitious enough by my standards. Now I see the problem was my standards." 6 years after divorce, and 2 years into marriage with Marcus, reflected on journey from controlling to accepting. Old me had been so certain that equal partnership required Jake to match my career drive and ambition, had made intimacy and acceptance conditional on him pursuing advancement he never wanted, had treated his contentment as character flaw and his different values as inadequacy. Result was divorce. Jake being miserable in role he'd never wanted, and years of regret about what I destroyed. New me understood that equality meant respecting different definitions of success and paths to fulfillment, that Marcus being content as teacher didn't make him less of partner than if he pursued administration, that people could contribute equally to relationship while having completely different career values and ambitions. Most importantly, that love should be unconditional acceptance, not contingent on meeting arbitrary achievement standards. Recently, Jake and his wife had their first baby. Saw announcement on social media through mutual friends. He'd scaled back to part-time manager role to be primary caregiver, while wife continued teaching. This choice would have horrified old me, seeing it as regression and lack of ambition, Nami saw it as person living according to his values and building life that brought him joy. Felt genuine happiness for him and gratitude that he'd been brave enough to leave marriage that wasn't serving him. If he'd stayed, we'd both be miserable. To him and role he hated, and me never learning these crucial lessons. Wrote in journal about everything I'd learned from demanding Jake get promoted, then losing him to divorce, that withholding intimacy to control partners' career choices was manipulative and abusive. Not feminist empowerment. That equal partnership means equal respect for different values, is not requirement that both people want same things. That accepting someone's contentment and different definition of success is harder but more important than pushing them to change. That measuring partners' worth by career advancement rather than character and values destroyed my marriage. Current reflections 7 years after setting intimacy ultimatum that led to Jake getting promoted and divorced, to learned that trying to force partner to match my values and ambitions wasn't creating equality, it was seeking control. That real equality means accepting different paths and definitions of success as equally valid. That conditioning love and intimacy on meeting career standards destroyed relationship with good man. That Jake's contentment with his role had been wisdom I couldn't recognize. Not inadequacy I needed to fix. Most importantly, that he'd been right to leave marriage where acceptance was conditional on changing fundamental values. That's what I learned from saying no intimacy till you get promoted and panicking when he got promoted and divorced. From thinking I was pushing him to be equal to realizing I was trying to control him to be like me. From measuring partnership by career achievement to valuing mutual acceptance and respect. That's my complete story about learning the hard way, that equality doesn't mean sameness in marriage. 7 years after divorce, started consulting with couples where one partner was pushing other toward career advancement. Many relationships showed same dynamic I'd created with Jake. One ambitious partner trying to change the other. First couple I worked with. Woman was pushing husband to leave teaching job for corporate training role. She said she couldn't respect him as equal partner when he made half her salary in low-status profession. Heard myself in her words. Recognized the contempt I'd had for Jake's contentment and different values, asked her what her husband contributed to relationship beyond career achievement and financial status. She listed that he was emotionally supportive, did most housework, was amazing with their kids. Made her laugh. Then said, "But none of that matters if he's not ambitious and driven professionally like I need him to be." Her husband said quietly that he loved teaching and was good at it, didn't want corporate job just for more money. Worked with them on understanding that equal partnership doesn't require identical career paths or values, that emotional support and household contribution were equally valuable as career advancement and high salary. 6 months later, she'd stopped pushing him to change careers. Their relationship had significantly improved. She told me, "Your story helped me see I was destroying good marriage over arbitrary career status requirements." Started writing book about lessons from my failed marriage, titled When Equal Means Identical. Learning Real Partnership. Detailed how I'd confused equality with sameness. Tried to force Jake to match my career ambition. How withholding intimacy to force promotion had been controlling and abusive. Not feminist empowerment. And how losing him had taught me that accepting different values was foundation of actual equal partnership. Book resonated with many readers, particularly women who'd been in similar controlling patterns with partners. One reviewer wrote, "This book saved my marriage. I was doing exact same thing to my husband, with same justifications." Another wrote, "I wish my ex-wife had read this before she destroyed our marriage with same impossible standards." Got some criticism from feminists who said I was advocating for women to accept less than they deserved, that I was teaching women to settle for unambitious men instead of holding out for true equals. Responded that true equals weren't people who matched your exact career trajectory and values. True equals were people who respected your path while you respected theirs, even when paths looked very different. 8 years after divorce. Jake and his wife had second child. He was still part-time manager and primary caregiver. His wife had become principal of her elementary school, but hadn't let career dominate their family life. They'd built life around their shared values of family time and experiences over career status and achievement. Heard through mutual friends, they were genuinely happy. Had strong marriage based on aligned values. This was what I'd been unable to give Jake, acceptance of his values and support for life he actually wanted. Marcus and I celebrated 3-year anniversary. Our marriage was everything my first one hadn't been. He turned down department chair position because it would mean less time in classroom, which was his passion. I fully supported that decision. Understood it reflected his values, not lack of ambition or drive. I'd been offered CEO position at startup, but declined because it would require 80-hour weeks indefinitely. Marcus fully supported that decision. Didn't see it as me failing to live up to potential. We both made choices based on our values and what brought fulfillment, not on climbing highest ladder. Recently facilitated workshop for Feminist organization about healthy partnership dynamics and avoiding controlling patterns. Shared my story about pushing Jake toward promotion and losing him. About learning equality doesn't mean sameness. One participant challenged me, saying, "So women should just accept whatever men want and not expect anything?" I said no. Women should have standards about respect, values alignment, emotional availability, shared life goals, but expecting a partner to have identical career, ambition, and definition of success isn't standard. It's control. Jake and I had aligned values about many things, but I couldn't accept his different approach to career. That wasn't him failing to be equal. That was me failing to respect difference as valid. Another participant said her boyfriend was content as barista while she was lawyer. Felt he was beneath her. Asked her what he contributed beyond career status. She said he was kind, creative, emotionally intelligent, great partner. Then said, "But how can I respect someone who's satisfied being barista when he's capable of more?" I said, "Capable of more, by whose definition, yours or his? And what makes career advancement more valuable than contentment?" She went quiet. Said she'd never questioned her assumption that ambition was inherently better than satisfaction. Workshop ended with many participants rethinking their assumptions about what they should expect from partners. Started teaching course at local university about gender equality in relationships beyond traditional frameworks. Main lesson was that equality doesn't require both partners to have identical values, ambitions, or career paths. It requires mutual respect, equal decision-making power, and valuing different contributions as equally important. That some of most unequal relationships are ones where partners claim equality while one tries to control the other. Students found this perspective challenging. Many had assumed equality meant both people pursuing similar paths. One student said, "I always thought I needed a partner as ambitious as me." Now questioning whether that's really what matters. Another said, "My parents have very different careers and ambitions, but equal partnership. Never understood how until now." 9 years after divorce. Saw Jake at mutual friend's wedding. First time seeing him in person since divorce finalized. He looked genuinely happy and relaxed. Introduced me to his wife, who was warm and friendly despite knowing our history. We talked briefly. He asked how I was doing and seemed genuinely interested. Not bitter or resentful. Told him I was remarried to Marcus, who was teacher. Found myself emphasizing that I'd learned to value different paths. He smiled and said, "I'm glad you found what works for you. Seems like you've learned a lot since we were married." I said, "I learned too late for us. But your leaving forced me to examine everything I'd been wrong about." He said, "Sometimes relationships serve their purpose by teaching us what we need to learn, even if they don't last. Our marriage taught me to value my own preferences over others' expectations. That's gift, even though it was painful." This conversation gave me closure. I hadn't realized I needed confirmation that he'd moved on without bitterness. Current reflection, 10 years after. telling Jake no intimacy until promotion and losing him to divorce. Learned that trying to force partner to match my values wasn't creating equality, it was destroying partnership, that withholding intimacy to control behavior was abuse, not empowerment. Regardless of how I justified it, that Jake's contentment with his career had been wisdom, not inadequacy. His values were valid, not lesser. That equal partnership means respecting different definitions of success and paths to fulfillment. Most importantly, that some lessons can only be learned by losing what we took for granted. That's everything I learned from demanding Jake get promoted and panicking when he got promoted and divorced me. From thinking equal meant identical to understanding equal means mutually respectful. From controlling to accepting. From judging to appreciating different values as equally valid. That's my complete journey from destroying marriage with impossible standards to building healthy partnership on acceptance. 10 years after divorce, the book I'd written had become required reading in several relationship counseling programs. Still received emails regularly from people who recognized themselves in my story. One message came from a successful attorney who admitted she'd been pressuring her husband to leave nonprofit work for corporate law. She wrote that reading about Jake had helped her realize she was treating her husband's values as inferior rather than simply different. Another came from a man whose wife constantly criticized his decision to stay in teaching instead of moving into administration. He said the book helped him understand he wasn't selfish or unambitious for valuing the work he actually enjoyed. These messages reinforced that my mistake hadn't been unique. Many people confuse equality with sameness. Many assume their values are objectively superior rather than personally meaningful. The more I studied relationship dynamics, the more I realized how common this pattern was. People often fall in love with someone, then gradually begin trying to reshape them into idealized version, not because they hate who partner is, but because they become convinced their own preferences are correct. I had done exactly that to Jake. I'd loved him, then spent years trying to make him different. Years after our divorce, I could finally admit that without defensiveness, Marcus sometimes asked questions about my first marriage, not out of jealousy, out of curiosity about lessons I'd learned. One evening he asked, "What do you think would have happened if you'd accepted Jake exactly as he was?" Thought about that for a long time. Finally said, "We probably would still be married, and I probably never would have learned these lessons." That answer carried sadness and gratitude at the same time. Sadness for relationship I destroyed. Gratitude for growth that followed. The truth was that Jake hadn't failed my marriage. I had failed to appreciate what I already had. He'd been loyal, supportive, emotionally available, responsible and kind. I'd overlooked all of that because I was focused on title, ambition, and status. The irony was painful. I claimed to value equality and partnership, yet I couldn't respect partner whose priorities differed from mine. Now, looking back, I understood something I couldn't see then. Jake wasn't lacking ambition. His ambition was simply directed toward different goals. He wanted healthy relationships, work-life balance, meaningful leadership, time for family, personal happiness. Those were ambitions too, just not ones that came with promotions and bigger offices. For years, I couldn't recognize that because I was measuring success using only one ruler. The lesson wasn't that ambition is bad. The lesson was that different ambitions can be equally valid. Some people want executive titles. Others want fulfilling work. Some want prestige. Others want peace. Neither path is inherently superior. The problem begins when one person decides their path is the only respectable one. That belief cost me my marriage, and learning that truth changed the rest of my life.